Hello, everyone. This is the shortest war in the world, part 2. Let go. Arab-Israeli War, Six-Day War, 1967. The Six-Day War, fought from June 5th to 10th, 1967, was a brief but transformative conflict between Israel and the Arab states of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Rising tensions since the 1956 Suez Crisis, coupled with Arab military alliances and hostile rhetoric, created a volatile pre-war atmosphere. Egypt escalated tensions by closing the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping, blockading the Port of Eilat, a move Israel deemed an act of war. Israel launched a preemptive air strike on June 5th, destroying most of Egypt's air force on the ground and Operation Focus, securing immediate air superiority. Israeli ground forces swiftly advanced into Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, overwhelming Egyptian troops and capturing the territory within days. Jordan, despite Israeli appeals for neutrality, shelled West Jerusalem, prompting Israel to counterattack and seize East Jerusalem and the West Bank. The capture of East Jerusalem reunited the city under Israeli control, while the West Bank's occupation displaced thousands of Palestinians. In the final days, Israel turned to Syria's Golan Heights, capturing the strategic plateau after fierce fighting, despite Syria's fortified positions. The war ended on June 10th with a UN-brokered ceasefire, leaving Israel in control of Gaza, Sinai, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. Israel's territorial gains quadrupled its size, reshaping regional geopolitics and creating enduring disputes over occupied lands. Casualties were lopsided. Israel lost about 800 soldiers, while Arab forces suffered over 20,000 deaths, highlighting the conflict's intensity. The UN passed Resolution 242, urging Israeli withdrawal from occupied territories and recognition of all state sovereignty, a framework still central to peace efforts. The war entrenched Israel's military dominance, but ignited prolonged occupation, settlement expansion, and Palestinian resistance in the West Bank and Gaza. Arab states, humiliated by defeat, convened the Khartoum summit, famously declaring no peace, no recognition, no negotiations with Israel. Israel's control of the Sinai and Golan provided strategic depth, while East Jerusalem's annexation held deep religious and national significance. The war exacerbated the Palestinian refugee crisis, with many fleeing newly occupied areas, deepening the humanitarian and political struggle. The 1973 Yom Kippur War, a failed Arab attempt to reclaim lost territories, further underscored the unresolved tensions from 1967. The 1979 Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty saw Sinai return to Egypt, marking the first Arab recognition of Israel, but leaving other territories contested. Today, the Golan Heights remains annexed by Israel, the West Bank under occupation, and East Jerusalem's status a core issue in peace talks. The Six-Day War's legacy endures in ongoing conflicts, settlement debates, and intermittent peace initiatives, symbolizing the intractable Arab-Israeli dispute. Indian-Portuguese War 1961. In 1961, India and Portugal went to war over control of Portuguese colonies, Goa, Dadra, and Nagar Haveli, on the Indian subcontinent. Portugal had established colonies along India's western coast since the 16th century and refused to relinquish these territories even after India gained independence in 1947. The Indian government attempted peaceful negotiations, but Portugal's dictator, António Salazar, adamantly opposed any compromise. On December 17, 1961, the Indian military launched Operation Vijay to reclaim the territories. India's overwhelming military force, Army, Air Force, and Navy, overpowered the vastly outnumbered Portuguese troops, who offered minimal resistance. The conflict ended within 48 hours, with Portugal surrendering on December 19, 1961. The war is celebrated in India as the historic liberation of Goa. Portugal appealed to the International Court of Justice, but India received widespread support at the United Nations. India's victory accelerated the global momentum for decolonization. Post-war, Goa and other territories were formally integrated into the Indian Union. Portugal refused to recognize Indian sovereignty until its 1974 Carnation Revolution. The conflict symbolized the end of colonialism and reinforced India's national unity. Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru described military action as a last resort. Casualties included 22 Indian soldiers and approximately 30 Portuguese troops. Around 3,000 Portuguese soldiers were captured as prisoners of war. The victory showcased India's modern military strategies and capabilities. Indian politicians commemorate the war as a triumph of anti-colonialism. International media praised India's swift and decisive operation. The event inspired liberation movements across Asia and Africa. December 19th is celebrated annually in India as Goa Liberation Day. The Persian-Georgian War, 1795. The Persian-Georgian War of 1795 was a pivotal conflict between the Qajar Persian Empire, led by Agha Mohammad Khan Qajar, and the Kingdom of Kartli-Kakheti in eastern Georgia under King Heraclius II. Historically, Georgia had been under Persian influence, but by the late 18th century, it sought autonomy, aligning with Russia via the 1783 Treaty of Georgievsk for protection. Agha Mohammad Khan, having reunified Persia under the Qajar dynasty, aimed to restore Persian hegemony over the Caucasus, including Georgia, which he viewed as a rebellious vassal. In 1795, he demanded Georgia's submission and termination of ties with Russia, but Heraclius II refused, relying on Russian guarantees under the treaty. In response, Agha Mohammad Khan mobilized a large Persian army, estimated at 35,000 to 40,000 troops, and marched toward Georgia in August 1795. The Georgian kingdom, with a significantly smaller force of 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers, prepared to defend its capital, Tbilisi, alongside limited Russian reinforcements. The decisive Battle of Kritsinisi occurred on September 8th to 11th, 1795, near Tbilisi, where Persian forces overwhelmed Georgian defenses through superior numbers and tactics. Despite fierce resistance, King Heraclius II's troops were outflanked, leading to a catastrophic defeat and the Persian capture of Tbilisi. Following the battle, Persian troops sacked Tbilisi, massacring civilians, enslaving thousands, and razing much of the city, marking a devastating blow to Georgian sovereignty. The invasion highlighted Russia's failure to honor its defensive obligations under the Treaty of Georgievsk, as promised reinforcements arrived too late to alter the outcome. Agha Mohammad Khan's victory reasserted Persian control temporarily, but his withdrawal allowed Russia to capitalize on Georgia's vulnerability. The war severely weakened Kartli-Kakheti, crippling its economy and military, and diminishing Heraclius II's authority until his death in 1798. In 1801, exploiting the power vacuum, Russia annexed Kartli-Kakheti, violating the Treaty of Georgievsk and absorbing Georgia into its empire. The conflict underscored the geopolitical rivalry between Persia and Russia over the Caucasus, setting the stage for further 19th century wars. Agha Mohammad Khan was crowned Shah of Persia in 1796, but was assassinated a year later, halting immediate Persian campaigns in the region. The sack of Tbilisi remains a traumatic event in Georgian history, symbolizing national resilience and the perils of external alliances. The war accelerated the decline of Persian influence in the Caucasus, as Russia increasingly dominated the region through military expansion. El Salvador and Honduras War. Football War 19. The Football War, also known as the 100-Hour War, was a brief armed conflict between El Salvador and Honduras from July 14th to 18th, 1969. Despite its name, the war was not caused by football, but stemmed from long-standing tensions over land disputes, immigration, and economic inequality. The trigger was a series of heated 1970 FIFA World Cup qualifier matches between the two nations in June 1969, which intensified nationalist fervor. Honduras, with a larger territory but smaller population, resented Salvadoran migrants who had settled on its land, leading to violent expulsions of Salvadorans. El Salvador, densely populated and economically strained, accused Honduras of human rights abuses against its citizens and severed diplomatic ties. On July 14th, El Salvador launched air raids and a ground invasion into Honduras, quickly capturing key towns before international intervention. The Organization of American States, OAS, negotiated a ceasefire, forcing El Salvador to withdraw its troops by August 1969. Around 3,000 people, mostly civilians, died in the conflict, and thousands more were displaced, worsening regional instability. The war crippled the Central American Common Market, CACM, damaging both economies and deepening political distrust. Though peace was officially restored in 1980, the football war remains a symbol of how sports can amplify underlying societal conflicts. Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896. The Anglo-Zanzibar War was fought between the British Empire and the Zanzibar Sultanate on August 27, 1896. It is considered the shortest recorded war in history, lasting only 38 to 45 minutes. The conflict began after Sultan Hamad bin Thawani, who was friendly to the British, died suddenly on August 25, 1896. His cousin, Khalid bin Barghash, seized power without British approval, violating a treaty signed in 1886. The British favored another candidate, Hamad bin Mohammed, who was more cooperative with their interests. The British issued an ultimatum demanding Khalid step down by 9 a.m. on August 27th. Khalid refused and instead barricaded himself inside the Zanzibar Sultan's palace with around 2,800 men. The British Royal Navy assembled 5 warships in the harbor, including HMS Philomel, HMS Raccoon, and HMS Asterisk Street. George Asterisk at 9:02 a.m. After the ultimatum expired, the British began bombarding the palace. The Zanzibari forces had outdated artillery and were quickly overwhelmed by British firepower. Khalid's wooden yacht, the Glasgow, was sunk within minutes of the battle starting. The palace was heavily damaged, and fires broke out, forcing Khalid's forces to retreat. Around 500 Zanzibari soldiers and civilians were killed or wounded, while only 1 British sailor was injured. Khalid bin Barghash fled to German East Africa, modern-day Tanzania, and was granted asylum. The British installed Hamad bin Mohammed as the new sultan, ensuring greater colonial control. Zanzibar officially became a British protectorate, further solidifying imperial influence in East Africa. The war demonstrated Britain's military dominance and willingness to enforce its political demands. Historians debate whether the conflict was a true war or merely a one-sided military intervention. The bombardment marked the end of Zanzibar's independence, as it remained under British rule until 1963. Today, the Anglo-Zanzibar War is remembered as an unusual and extreme example of colonial power projection.